We've been talking about a soul for the last, Pastor Allen shared that with us last week, that message, that soul, that part of us that comes alive, that breath that God breathes into us, that enlivens us, that sets us apart from so many different other creatures in our world. The soul that continues to breathe and to live, the soul that continues to grow and to be. We sang different songs about soul. It is well with my soul. Comes from an old hymn by Mr. Spafford. It's just that opportunity to look at our soul as we look at this great commandment that God gave to us. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That soul is that part of us that just opens up. But it's also that part of us that hides. Parker Palmer has this quote, and I wanted to share it with you. He says, "The soul is like a wild animal, tough, resilient, resourceful, savvy. It knows how to survive in hard places, but is also shy. Just like a wild animal, it seeks safety in the dense underbrush. If we want to see a wild animal, we know that the last thing we should do is to go crashing through the woods, yelling its name to come to us." That idea that soul is resilient and tough, that soul is that part of us that bounces back, but it's also shy. I like this picture of the kids running through the woods, because if you ever followed kids through the woods, they're never quiet, and usually they're not walking. The other image I had in my mind as I read this quote from Palmer Parker was like that squirrel that you're trying to feed. You give it little by little so it gets closer and closer, and then all of a sudden you move and it runs away. Kind of like our soul in that. And that we want to explore it, we want to see it, we want to understand that part of us that comes alive, but there's so many things that come crashing in our world. So many things that come crashing in our world that begin to strike at us, that begin to wound us, that begin to have our soul, which is very hardy, which is very resilient, but which is also shy, begins to retreat. And we begin to put up the walls, and we begin to lay down that foundation and that block to keep ourselves safe, to keep that soul, that inner part of us, hidden. And it makes it really hard, not just that first part of living out that commandment to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, but it really makes it hard for that second part, to love our neighbors. And if we were really to looking at it, that third part, as we love ourselves. Because there's so many things in our world that begin to hit us, so many things in our world that begin to cause our soul to go back inside. I think one of the best people that I see and are reminded of this, actually there's two in the scriptures. One is Peter. And if you remember Peter's story, he walks with Jesus and he shares with Jesus. He opens up so many things. He tells Jesus he is the Son of God. He says, let's build some houses so that you can stay here. And now Jesus, we come to this point in the story where Jesus is arrested and he's on trial. And Peter's standing there following at a distance. And he enters into this place. And as Peter's entering into this place, someone comes up to him and says, didn't I see you with him? Didn't I see you with Jesus? Didn't I see you talking and walking with him? Peter says, no, it wasn't I. Someone else comes up to him and says, you know what? I hear that accent in your voice. I can tell you're with him. I can tell you're from the same area that Jesus is. And Peter says, no, it's not me. And he has this third one where he says, you know what, someone else comes to him, I'm pretty certain you were there. And Peter says, it was not I. And he runs away. Because he realized that he had just denied knowing Jesus. He just had that soul that was filled with love, that soul that was filled with hope, that soul that said that Jesus is the Son of God, that I would travel with Jesus wherever he goes. That soul just got damaged because of his own words and his own actions. And if we think for a moment, we also can find ourselves in Peter's shoes. We understand when our soul is damaged, where we have to make some tough choices, where we say that we're following Christ and we say we're showing love, but then something happens. And that love that we say we have isn't there like someone else thought it would be. And we get called out on the carpet on it. We get called out and said, hey, I thought you said you were a Christ follower. I thought you said that you wanted to share the love of Christ. I thought you said you would be able to forgive. Isn't that what Jesus teaches, to forgive others? How come you're not? And our soul takes that in, and our soul reacts to that. And all of a sudden our soul goes backwards. Our soul is hurt. And it's damaged. Because someone went crashing through our woods and was yelling. And this isn't the first time in church history or church life that someone like Peter or someone in our own situation has had that soul being damaged, that soul being hurt. John Wesley always would, as he had his groups get together, as he had these moments for people to gather around, and John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist movement, had these questions that he would have the groups ask. There's one question that they would always ask, and the one question is how is it with your soul? John Wesley would ask that question and on purpose because he wanted the group to see. He wanted the group to know where their souls were hurt, where their souls were damaged, where their souls could find solace and rescue, where their souls could be restored, because he knew that as we lived our life, that our soul would struggle. But if we would continuously to look for that question, and we would continuously to look to see what that means, that we could encourage our soul, that we could bring it out, that we could bring it to life, that we could say yes to God's deep call in our life. And it just wasn't in that moment that John Wesley had this. There's as Peter, again, is seeing Jesus, and now Jesus has died, and Jesus rose again, and now he's sitting on a beach. And we get this picture of Jesus, or picture of Peter. It's the scripture is going to be on the screen behind me. It says these things. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." And soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, because he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. You see, Peter's soul was damaged. Peter's soul was hurting, and he didn't know what else to do, so he went fishing, because that was where he understood. That's something he knew he could do, something that wouldn't cause further damage, but also gave him time to think, gave him time to reflect, gave him time to understand and to look at his life and to see what was going on, to feel the depth of that betrayal. And all of a sudden, as John, or the disciple whom Jesus loved, pointed out that there's Jesus, Peter got ready and he jumped out of the boat and he swam to shore, about 100 yards, they say, 100 feet. No, yards and feet are totally different, but 100 feet. And as Peter got there, Jesus had a fire going. Jesus was preparing, because Peter, his heart and his soul, that inner part of him was taking the time to think. Was taking the time to ask questions. He was checking on his soul. He was sitting there and just wondering and pondering. What is going on in my life? And as soon as he saw Jesus, he had this opportunity to ask his questions. To seek this newness, to seek this wholeness that he could have. Same thing with us, as we sit there and someone poses that question to us. Someone says, I thought you were. And that soul that's been damaged begins to look, and we begin to reflect upon our life. Well, I thought I was too. I thought I was living the Christian life. I thought I was loving my neighbor as myself. I thought I was forgiving as God had forgiven me. I thought I was. I thought that my soul was going to grow. I thought my soul was going to live. I didn't think the damage that was being done was going to be this hard. I didn't think it was going to be this difficult to love my neighbor. I didn't think it was going to be this difficult to love myself. To allow that soul to come out, to give that soul the strength and the energy it needed. And we don't realize that, and we don't take the time to think about that if we don't slow down. If we don't take that moment to reflect and ask God, what is going on? There's that I forgot to look up the hymn. I was meant to do that. That part of a hymn that says, my sin-sick soul. That soul that's been crushed because of the words and the actions that we have done. That soul that says that there is more to this world and more to this life. That soul that says there is something else. That soul that says that these burdens I carry, they're not mine, but I feel them and they're heavy. A soul that says these woods are screaming and I need to run and hide. And as Peter is there, as Peter comes to Jesus, and there's this sense of peace. And as we sit at the feet of Jesus, we still have these questions bubbling up. We still have these actions and these words that we're concerned about, but there comes this peace. This peace that says there is more. This peace that says that our soul will be restored. Psalm 23, verse 3, beginning of it says, He restores my soul. You see, God just doesn't want us to be wrestling all the time. Jesus just doesn't want us to be heavy burdened. Jesus doesn't want our soul to continue to retreat and build up walls and continue to be hidden and continue to be high and continue to be put away. But He wants our soul to come alive. He wants us to hear His call. He wants us to say yes with our soul, with that part that's deep within us. Even through the damage, even through the heartache, even through the pain, Jesus is still calling us. He still has that beachside fire burning. He still has that voice that says, come to me. As Peter gets to the shore and as he's there with Jesus, Jesus has a few words for him. It's found in the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verses 15 and 17. He says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he says, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered me, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? And Peter said, Lord, You know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. See, Peter's soul was hurt. And Peter's soul was living with that pain of denying Jesus. And Peter's soul was struggling with where to go next. And then as he saw Jesus, he understood that denial was something else. But Jesus said, there's more to you than just that denial. And he had to ask Peter into the depths of his soul, do you love me? Do you trust me? Do you believe in me? Will you continue to follow me? And that soul of Peter's needed those words. It may have hurt for the moment where Jesus asked it multiple times. I mean, it's like your kids, right? You ask them to put something away. How many times? Once? Twice? Maybe 5 times and they listen? Maybe 10? Maybe a little bit more? It doesn't hurt them. Right? You ask them and it doesn't hurt them, but there's a pain that comes in you. I'm asking you. And Peter's hearing those same words of Jesus. Do you love me? Well, Lord, I already answered that question. No, Peter, do you love me? Well, Lord, you already know that. No. Peter, look at me. Look at my eyes. Hear the tone of my voice. Hear my heart. Do you love me? From the depth of your soul, do you love me? See, Jesus wanted to restore Peter's soul. He wanted to bring it back to life. He wanted to continue to heal and cleanse it and make it whole again. And Jesus wants to do the same for us. Our souls are hurting. We live in a day and age where soul care is not always there. We live in a day and age where Jesus is at times just put aside and sometimes ridiculed. You believe in the fairy tales? There are times when we hear that Jesus doesn't matter. And there's sometimes our actions back that up. Our actions say, well, I can do it on my own. I don't need to rely on Jesus. I can do this. And our soul says, whoa, wait a minute. There's more to this life than just what I can do. And Jesus wants to restore our soul. He wants to renew our heart and bring us back into that relationship with Him. And so He asked us, do you love me? He asked us, do you trust me? He asked us, will you continue to follow me? And there's that time when we give the surface answer and we say, yeah, sure. A little bit more nonchalantly than what our soul requires of us. So Jesus asked us again, do you love me? Do you? Does your soul answer that question? Does your soul live out that love? Does your soul say that there is more? Or have you built that wall? Because those wounds are deep. And those wounds hurt. And we wrestle. And we struggle. And Jesus continues to say, do you love me? And he gently calls us. And he gently speaks to us until that soul within us begins to come out. And then he says, do you love me? Will you follow me? Will you listen to my voice? Will you take these next steps? Will you forgive? Will you love your neighbor? As Jesus restores our souls, there's a few things that I think a restored soul will see. A restored soul will continue to seek truth. Will continue to look at the world around them and continue to ask questions. Where is truth in this? Where is Jesus in this? Where is the heart in this? Where is the will of God in this? A restored soul will also be at peace. And Peter, as he ended that conversation with Jesus, was saddened, but not as saddened and as in turmoil and in strife as he was before that conversation. There was a new heart. And there was hope. That restored soul just doesn't say, well, this is all there is. That restored soul is that there is something different coming, that Jesus is here, that Jesus is moving. And that hope that I have in the forgiveness of God, that hope that I have in the newness of life, the hope that I have in this world being changed, it's not just words. Because it's deep within us. If we go back to John Wesley's words, his question, how is it with my soul? It raises a good question. Is your soul troubled? Is it at peace? Is it seeing hope? Or is it seeing the fear? Is it seeking truth? Or is it making it up? How is it with your soul? For me, my soul has been wounded. It's in the process of being restored and renewed. But those wounds have been deep. Some have been self-inflicted. But I've been clinging to that promise of Psalm 23:3. Jesus wants to restore my soul. And it's learning to trust, learning to love, learning to hear the words that Peter hears. Do you love me? and feed my sheep. And those sheep can mean a bunch of different things. But I know there's a day when Jesus will continue, when Jesus brings that restoration to completeness. And I can say, it is well with my soul. How is it with your soul?